Well, the New South Wales government has shot down calls by public servant campaigners for a boycott on computing giant Hewlett Packard over the company's alleged links with Israel. 800 union members and public servants of a group called PSA for Palestine signed a petition calling for the government to immediately cease entering into contracts with HP and offer protections for public sector workers so they could refuse to administer HP contracts and operate HP computers. Now, I say, if you have a problem, resign. Honestly, what a bunch of overpaid underperformers. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Louise Roberts and Will Kingston, the host of The Spectator Australia's Fire at Will podcast. Hi to both of you. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Will, they can't be working too hard, can they, if they actually have time to go around and sign petitions like this?
Probably not. The hosting chair suits you, Danica, as an aside. A couple of things I would say on this. The first thing I would say is if you dig into the financial records of any global company, you will find relationships with dodgy countries, whether it be Russia, whether it be the Middle East, whether it be Africa. Unfortunately, that's just the way that global business works. It really is starting to irritate me that these sorts of activists only seem to care when the Jews are involved. Now, I'll let viewers make up their own minds as to why that is the case, but it seems to be a recurring pattern as we go through these sorts of issues in the Middle East. But the other thing I would say is we have raised a generation of young workers that don't seem to understand the nature of the employee and employer relationship. Like, the whole thing of being an employee is occasionally you have to suck up things that you don't like in your job. That's just the reality. And I think these sorts of businesses could do worse than to put their foot down and say, you know what, if you don't like it, guys, there's the door.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know if they're just lazy or just plain stupid. Louise, surely, as Will said, they've got to be shown the door now. If you've got a problem with the way that your company that you are an employee for runs it, leave, go. No one's stopping you.
Well, that's right, but often they won't, because you find that devotion to advocacy doesn't really extend to their hip pockets, so they're happy to take the salary and also complain at the same time. But I think also, Danica, this sets a really dangerous precedent that employees can sort of pick and choose which jobs they'll do and which things align to their own political beliefs. And as we're discussing, that's not the nature of working for a company. If you want to do that, set up on your own and have your own political vision.
Yeah, go for it, you know, be our guest. Now, look, Victoria's government is being urged to crack down on cowboy cabbies ahead of the Australian Open to stamp out a dodgy payment method that allows drivers to charge outrageous prices. Each taxi has a payment terminal attached to its meter, which prevents drivers from adding extra charges to a ride. But some cabbies are using a separate handheld payment terminal to charge inflated amounts, bypassing that meter entirely. Well, I was thinking, you know, this happened to me last year when I was at the Melbourne Cup in Melbourne. You go a very short distance and suddenly you go to pay and you go, oh my goodness, this is a lot more expensive than I had anticipated. Does there need to be better regulation?
Absolutely not. I hate regulation, Danica. I think it is the wrong answer to almost every question. Here's what we should be doing. We should be yelling and screaming from the rooftops on shows like this to say, you know what, this is unacceptable. And then viewers should say, well, you know what, taxis are ripping people off. And hey, we've got this phone in our pockets, which has an app called Uber, and it can get you somewhere cheaper and more conveniently. That's how we solve these sorts of problems. The one thing I actually am a bit concerned about is whenever these sorts of problems come up, the government then steps in and says we're going to regulate. The market can solve these problems, and in this instance, the market is Uber. And I'm actually surprised that the taxis are still going when they're delivering this sort of rubbish customer experience.
Yeah, and I think, look, most cab drivers out there are honest, Louise, but this is what does turn people off from using them and going with Uber and other ride-sharing services instead.
That's right, and as we said, most cabbies the vast majority of cabbies are hard-working, honest, and an absolute delight to be sitting in their vehicle while they drive you around, so it's unfair to malign them with this obviously very rogue minority. But you have a choice as a passenger. You can get into a taxi and say, put the meter on. If they won't put the meter on, get out of the taxi. It's that simple. Or use Uber. And I think also we're used to having a set price, and now there's this mentality, unfairly, has erupted where people feel that the cabbie is sort of got to go the scenic route or the longer route and actually cost us more, when in fact they're probably just stuck in traffic. So, as a customer, you do have a choice: either use Uber or get in the taxi and ask for the meter to be switched on. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, let's go to the US, because US comedian Whitney Cummings has, in my opinion, delivered CNN the boost in ratings it quite frankly so desperately needs after roasting the Democrats live on air on New Year's Eve. Have a look at this.
I love touring. It's the best. I'm now playing, like 3,000-seat theaters, awesome. Which is about the viewership of CNN these days. 2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Are we still rolling? Am I off?
Go for it.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer.
Will, I don't know what's more funny, her comment or Anderson Cooper standing next to her looking stunned and not knowing what to say there. But, I mean, she's right.
Yeah, stunned and guilty, because he was one of the main perpetrators of so many of the frauds that CNN perpetrated on the American people. You mentioned, Danica, their ratings are not just bad, they are catastrophically bad, and they fully deserve it. If you are going to be a mainstream media business in this day and age, you have to be honest with your audiences. Businesses like Sky in Australia, like GB News in the UK are doing well, they will endure. Businesses like CNN and MSNBC are absolutely being destroyed because people have woken up to the fact that they have a very clear agenda and they're not levelling with their audiences. So, look, this was very funny because it basically said that the emperor had no clothes, and unfortunately for places like CNN, they're only going in one direction and they deserve it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Louise, I think that she maybe spoke too much truth for CNN's liking.
She did. I mean, I think this clip's had about 9 million plus views or something, hasn't it? So I would say to CNN, take note. This is an audience-led approach to content. Your audience clearly want to watch this sort of thing. That they're sick to death of being force-fed this woke agenda, and the way you were the Biden-Kamala cheer squad was just appalling.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, look, I've got to show you both this lovely vision. Donald and Melania Trump singing and dancing to YMCA during New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago. Have a look at this. I just want to know how I can get an invite into a Mar-a-Lago party, because I reckon it would be. And then Will's already got the dance moves. Will knows it.
What a time to be alive.
What a time! Well, look, what a time to be alive, Will. And I quite enjoyed seeing Melania Trump with a bit of rhythm.
Yeah, it was great. Look, there's a couple of kind of things. And look, this is light and fun. Number one, the thing which the left continuously gets wrong about Donald Trump is that he is likeable. You can't look at that content and not have a little smile on your face. And I think it's something which they continuously discredit. And also, because she is married to Donald Trump, she has been this hate figure, despite being a really impressive woman and by all accounts, a very intelligent and very likeable woman. All this sort of stuff, again, just puts paid to the nonsense masquerade that so much of the left has tried to put on both Donald and Melania.
And the other thing is, Louise, is that the YMCA dance now has actually become a cultural phenomenon. People love to do it. It's no longer, no, don't do it because Donald Trump does it. People want to do it.
That's right. And if this doesn't scream man of the people, then what does? And it's great, as we've said, that Melania can shake off some of this very unfair criticism, because she's very clever. She's a woman in her own right, very strong, very opinionated, as we know. So hopefully that will dispel some of the myth around her and roll on January 20. Let's hope we see some singing and dancing at that event as well.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I've got to ask you both, are we becoming a nation of prudes? According to 9 newspapers, nude beaches are being shut down around the country. Have we become a nanny state? Will, over to you. What do you think? Are we a nation of prudes?
Yeah, to be honest, the more and more I think about this sort of stuff, the more I think we actually always have been. I said this on Sky the other day. I'm going to repeat it. The great Clive James said, it is not that we are descended from convicts that is the problem with Australia. It's that we are descended from jailers. I think this instinct has always been there. And I would just say to everyone, first they come for the nude beaches and we go, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. But they'll start coming for more serious stuff. And I think there aren't enough Australians who are standing up for their freedoms. I really hope in 2025, more of us stand up for individual liberty and the, ability to get your kid off at the beach. Go for it.
Here, and, you go to Europe in the end and nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody cares. But for some reason, here in Australia, we're still with that mindset, Louise. Do you think that we are a nation of prudes?
I think we're becoming that way. It's interesting we're talking about how we've always been that way, but I feel that perhaps this sort of woke mindset that's permeated society, telling people how to think and when to think it, is making people second guess themselves, and that's led to a nudist beach being shut down. And they haven't really explained why they've done it, apart from the so-called public outcry. But if it's a nude beach and you don't want to see nude bodies, there's plenty of other beaches to go to. And why not let these people, naturists, nudists, just be allowed to swim and sunbathe the way they want to? They're not offending the rest of us, really, are they?
Well, no, exactly. If you want to go to a normal beach, go for it. You want to go to a nudist beach? Be my guest. Louise Roberts, Will Kingston, good to have you both on. Thank you very much for joining me on the show this evening.